Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump right into today's explainer. What we're looking at isn't just your run-of-the-mill classic car. We're talking about a true legendary 1957 Chevy Bel Air. But this isn't some pristine showroom floor trailer queen. This is a legitimate barn find. It's been sitting completely untouched, hidden away in the dark for decades. So today, we're going to walk through the incredible journey of resurrecting this piece of automotive history, following the exact steps and surprises the team encountered when they finally dragged it out of the dust.
And that brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. Will it actually run? I mean, it's the ultimate mechanical cliffhanger, right? We've got to figure out if this forgotten American icon still has a heartbeat, or if after all this time, it's basically just a very heavy, very stylish piece of scrap metal. 35 years. Just let the sheer weight of 3.5 decades of absolute neglect sink in for a second. Literally, nobody had heard this legendary V8 engine run since the 1980s. When complex machinery sits dormant for that long, well, physics and time are definitely not its friends. Fluids turn into pure sludge, rubber basically turns to dust, and metal just fuses together. So that number right there, it makes the stakes for this upcoming resurrection incredibly high. But then there's the price tag, $1,900. In the world of classic cars, especially a 57 Bel Air with an original V8 still under the hood, that asking price is just staggeringly low. As our source material highlights, walking away from a gamble at that price point was absolutely impossible. You just have to take the risk. Of course, the previous owner offered up that classic, all too familiar promise, ran when it was parked. Anybody who's ever looked at buying an old project car knows this phrase all too well. It instantly builds this intense curiosity. Like, was it parked because of some catastrophic engine failure, or was it really just forgotten about? The actual truth was hidden right there beneath the hood, just waiting to be discovered. So when the team arrived to make their initial assessment, they realized almost immediately that this wasn't your ordinary rusted-out barn find. The starting condition was actually surprisingly good. The body of the car was incredibly straight. Most of the original chrome was still attached and totally intact. And while the interior was undeniably filthy from decades of sitting, it was amazingly complete. It had, really good bones, as they say. But, well, the romanticism faded pretty quickly once they hauled the car back to the shop. Just look at this staggering list of obstacles. We're talking thick layers of accumulated dust, rock-hard mud dauber nests packed into literally every conceivable engine crevice, dry-rotted hoses that just crumbled the second you touched them, super fragile old wiring, and completely missing drive belts. Absolutely nothing about this car was ready to run. So how do you even tackle a mountain like that? Very, very methodically. The team started with the first bite-sized mechanical steps just to try and coax the engine back to life. Step 1, they swapped out the corroded battery cables to ensure power could actually flow. Step 2, they checked the oil, basically praying they wouldn't find signs of catastrophic internal damage. And Step 3, they got to the meticulous work of cleaning the ignition points. It's all about creating a solid foundation for that engine to eventually fire. And man, all that careful prep work led to a massive revelation. The engine isn't locked up. Seriously, when an engine sets for 35 years, the pistons can rust completely solid right to the cylinder walls. If that happens, you're looking at a total, painful rebuild. But to their absolute surprise, the old V8 could still physically turn over. This was the first major tension-relieving victory of the whole process. The heartbeat was faint, sure, but the heart itself wasn't frozen. However, as we all know, turning over definitely isn't the same thing as actually running. And that brings us to restoring the spark. The team discovered a critical challenge right away. The distributor points had completely stopped working. Now, in a classic combustion engine, without a spark, the entire project is completely dead in the water. You can have all the air and fuel in the world, but no spark means absolutely no fire. So they had to carefully clean and adjust these really delicate points just to bridge that crucial gap. Okay, so after those super careful adjustments to the ignition system, we finally start to see some real progress. They tried it again and boom, the starter engaged and actually turned the engine over with some real authority this time. The mechanical systems were finally starting to remember what they were built to do. So now they had rotation, they had spark. Honestly, all they needed now was fuel and maybe just a little bit of luck. All right, the moment of truth. You could literally cut the tension in that shop with a knife. The team poured fresh gasoline directly down into the carburetor. This is it, the very first real attempt to start the car under its own combustion, after more than 3 decades. Everyone is just holding their breath, waiting to see if the massive gamble of that $1,900 purchase was actually about to pay off. They turned the key, and for a split second, it coughed. Just this brief, rough, incredibly beautiful noise. It was the thrill of a lifetime in the shop that day. That singular cough was the engine showing its very first real sign of life, finally proving that the spark and the fuel were actually meeting inside those cylinders. But then, just silence. Immediately after that initial, super hopeful cough, the engine died. It was this moment of crushing suspense. Was that one cough everything the old Chevy had left to give? They had to pause, regroup, make one more tiny adjustment, and just gear up for one more try.
And then the impossible actually happened. The old Chevy roared back to life. After 35 years sitting in the absolute dark, that classic V8 engine was finally running again. And you know what the best part was? There was zero smoke pouring out. There were no scary metallic knocking noises. It was just the smooth, beautiful sound of classic American horsepower. It's just a truly triumphant climax to this whole mechanical resurrection. Now, the engine was running, yes, but the journey definitely wasn't over. They were now prepping for the ultimate test, actually driving it. But there were issues. The original fuel pump had entirely failed. Several of the old tires simply wouldn't hold air anymore, and the original cooling hoses were literally disintegrating. The car was awake, sure, but it definitely wasn't ready to run a marathon. So they had to get creative and fast. They rigged up a temporary fuel system just to bypass that broken pump. They slapped on some better wheels and tires so the car could safely touch the ground, replaced the missing belts, and filled up the cooling system to keep that V8 from totally melting down. These were super hasty temporary MacGyver solutions, rigged up purely to see if this resurrected vehicle could actually move under its own power. And slowly, the Bel Air rolls forward. For the first time in over 35 years, this car wasn't just a static object rotting in a barn anymore. It was actually driving again. It's just an incredibly triumphant, deeply emotional moment. Think about it. Decades of sitting, gathering dust, totally written off as history, and now it is literally inching its way back onto the pavement. All they need is a second chance. You know, watching a forgotten classic return to the road like this really forces us to reflect on why we rescue these old machines in the first place. It's not just about, metal and oil. It's about history, craftsmanship, and the inherent deep satisfaction of bringing something beautiful right back from the brink of being lost forever. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn it right over to you with the exact same question the restorers posed. Now that this 57 Chevy Bel Air has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it still has a heartbeat, what comes next? Would you fully restore it to its former glory, pouring in all that time and money? Or would you sell it as a running, driving piece of history and let someone else finish the dream? It's a really tough choice. Let that sink in. Thanks for joining me on this incredible mechanical journey, and keep that curiosity alive.